think we're at 200,000 views on the videos we did.
Wow.
So it's getting a lot of
on TikTok.
on TikTok. Yeah.
Holy cow! See, I know nothing about TikTok. I have no idea how it works. I don't have an account.
It's wild because on YouTube it's a little bit smaller and the outreach isn't as good, but on TikTok it really hit a chord with a lot of people in the comments. I mean, I must have had thousands of comments and questions, of course. And I did write down some of the questions, so I did have a couple of them. But I definitely wanted to get a chance to kind of talk about, like I said, the remedies. The first interview we had was a lot about, kind of the toxic psychology and some of the therapies. But this was, I was trying to get more of what you've seen work and how you got into the Mace Method, and how you kind of use it now in your own private practice to help people in all walks of life. Talk a little about the Mace Method with a couple of the guys. And then we also, that's a live program. That's the other one that you suggest and you've had a good experience with.
Yeah, that's for intrusive thoughts.
Right.
Or the voices. I mean, they're one and the same.
I kind of jumped the gun on some of these questions. I did want you to kind of go over how you found the Mace Method and what got you started in that.
Well, that's awful strange. I mean, it's like, there are no mistakes. So, I get all these letters from a lot of strange people, in what I'm doing. And, I don't want to deal with some of them. I try to deal with as many logical ones as I can, but there's some that are out there. So I'm checking my email one day, and here's this message from somebody, I think in the Midwest, and it says, "I got somebody you need to meet." He said, at worst, it would be like meeting a jolly old grandmother. And I'm like, that's so far different from what I get usually. Right. He wasn't asking for anything for himself. He's just saying, I got this jolly old grandmother you got to meet, and he'd been listening to the stuff that I put out. So I went, that's interesting. And something inside told me, don't ignore this one. Okay. So, I contacted him back, and I kind of went, what's all this about? Jolly old grandmother stuff. And he told me a little bit about Mace, enough just to whet my appetite. I never heard of it before. It was totally new to me. So he told me about the books. Told me a little bit about Mace. And I went, well, this is interesting. It got my interest because it was quick and accurate. So I bought the two books. I think it was Causism and Energy Over Mind. I think they were by John Mace. And I read them, and it just made intuitive sense to me right away. It's like, this makes sense. So I started using it with the people I was working with, and indeed it worked. So after reading the two books, there was enough basic information in there with my background to be able to put it to use, and I was putting it to use, and it was working. Okay. So then I had the meeting with the jolly old grandma, and it was Cherie. You've talked to her, right?
Yes.
Okay. So it was like, well, she was going, well, why don't you take the course? And I didn't even know that there was a course. And I'm like, well, why should I take a course when it's working the way I have it now? I mean, right. I got enough, I pieced enough stuff together where it's working now. It's working great. And, she ran some of the stuff on me, and, I saw it. The course was a bit pricey, but she talked me into it. So I got to using it, and there was a lot more to it than what I had. There was a whole lot more to it. And then there were basic and then advanced kind of stuff. So it was working great to remove trauma. It was working great to kind of clean up the mess, especially with a lot of these psychotic patients. But it didn't work real well in a direct attack against the voices themselves. So if you try to use it for a particular voice that is tormenting the patient, it just kind of seemed to bounce off them, off of that thing. And instead of feeling energetic, like most of the patients do after you get rid of some of the garbage, they felt drained. And it took a long time. So like one thing after another, and it was a struggle for, you know, so it didn't work as a direct attack against the voices that way. But what it did do is it removed a lot of the crap that these things feed off of. So that these traumas that they have, these negative entities will go in there and they will trigger those traumas because they feed off of the negative emotional energy that triggering those traumas produces. They don't give a damn about the person. They want the energy. You know, so if you talk to psychotic patients, and they don't even realize this unless you bring it up, you ask them after the voices attack, can you feel your energy is gone? Because when I was working at the state hospital, I mean, I remember one guy told me that after an attack, he's as exhausted as if he were working with a pickaxe out in the hot sun all day, and all he was doing was laying in bed being tormented by the voices all night. And then, the more I got into it, it was a consistent pattern. When the voices attack a psychotic patient, their energy level drops to nothing, but they don't realize it until you bring it up. And I thought for years that it was, if I had a voice in my head screaming, saying, "You're no good, you're stupid, you're ugly, you're rotten, all this stuff, everybody hates you, you're never going to amount to," I mean, it's just constant negative, 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 negative. If I had that, I think I'd be drained too. And for years I thought, well, that's what it was. It's the abuse of these voices. Uh, More normal people would call them intrusive thoughts, negative intrusive thoughts, but they operate the same way. They run the same patterns as do the psychotic voices. So I was thinking for years while I was working at this was while I was working psych in the one of the big state prisons. I was assigned to the jail for the prison, which is where the worst of the worst went. These were the guys that got in trouble in all the other prison units, and they got sent to the jail, which was like a super max unit. And I walked into my office one day, and here's a letter from one of the prisoners who's saying, "Help me! I'm stuck in a small cell over here in the CDU with a flaming psychotic lunatic." And he's standing there at night, in the middle of the night, 3 a.m, standing there staring down at me. And I wake up and he's standing there looking at me, just staring at me. So, that's got to be pretty spooky because they're in a small cell. What is it, 10 by 10 or something? It's not a big cell, enough for, a sink, a toilet, two beds, which were the bunk beds, and just a little desk. That's it. There's really no room to walk around in there. So I looked up this guy's record, the guy who wrote me. But even before I did that, I got a call from the captain of the CDU saying, "Listen, you got to get over here and do something with these two. They're causing a fair amount of trouble now, and I don't know what to do with them." So here's 2 things coming in from CDU virtually at the same time. So I looked up the prison record of the guy who was not psychotic, and I was wondering why he was in there. Well, it turns out he was in there for protective custody. Okay, where'd you lose me?
You were just talking about his how he got into trouble and what caused for him to be in the position he was in.
Yeah. So what happened with the guy who this psychotic guy was staring at, and the psychotic guy is pacing the floor all night, talking to himself in voices and cursing and acting really strange. The guy who was in there with him was sane. He snitched off a drug deal on the Aryan Brotherhood, which are a big gang within the prison, nasty gang. So he was in there for protective custody because they went, "You're dead. We're going to kill you." So they put him in there for protective custody. They threw him in there with whoever, and it turned out to be this psychotic guy. So I went over there and I talked to this guy who was complaining. "Hey, I'm locked in with a crazy guy." Pulled him up and they let him out of his cell. And I watched as he came up the cell block door stairs. There were like, two things of stairs to get up to where the interview room was, and near the control tower. And he had plenty of energy. He walked up those stairs. He didn't have to use the guardrail. He came right in. He sat down. He was anxious. He was nervous, but he wasn't drained. He had plenty of energy. His speech was normal. The tempo was normal. It was, everything was good. I told him, I don't have a lot of power as a psych, but I'll do what I can for you. So I let him go, watched him go back down, and then I called out his psychotic cellmate and watched him come up the steps. Very slow, no energy. And he had to hold onto the guardrail. He kind of drug himself over to the office, came in, sat down, slumped in the chair, no energy, just drained. His speech was slow. He was somewhat confused. But what struck me was the lack of energy as compared to this other guy. Now, there wasn't any better experimental situation than this. They were both in the same cell. They're being treated the same way. They're being given the same food. They're being treated by the same guards. They're in the same physical place. Everything is equalized. There was no better experimental situation. After I got them talking with the psychotic guy, I watched as he made his way down the steps, no energy, went back into the cell. And I left there going, it's not the content of the voices. There's something else going on. So it turned out that these voices, these psychotic voices, were actually draining their victims. So I started asking other prisoners and about that. I mean, even back when I was working in the state hospital, I asked about that. And that was a consistent pattern. After the voices came, these people were drained. But when I ran into that one situation, I was thinking all those years before that it was due to the content of the voices, which were nasty, abusive, ugly. I thought if you had to listen to that all day, yeah, you'd be drained. But it turned out, no, the situation woke me up to a totally different deal there. So I knew at that point that they were being drained by the voices. So it'd be the same as very strong negative intrusive thoughts. They're the same thing. They hit us all. It's not just the psychotics that hear these things. We all hear them.
Did you have any remedy for him at that point? Because obviously you were talking about the Mace Method. That wouldn't be something that would work.
That was years before the Mace Method.
Okay.
The only thing I knew at that point was that they were parasites. The 23rd, I knew the 23rd Psalm worked. They hate the 23rd Psalm. So I was told that when I worked in the state hospital. When I ran, what I'd do is I'd run into a psychotic patient who would tell me something he found that worked, and then I'd bring in all these other patients and ask them to use it and see what result they had. And if it checked out consistently, then I would put it to use. And the 20, I'm not a religious fanatic. I believe in God. I know he exists. He saved my ass a bunch of times. I should be dead 10 times over by now. But the 23rd Psalm, the patients in the state hospital were telling me that the psychotic voices in response to the 23rd Psalm reacted like worms thrown on a hot frying pan. And that is proved consistent all the way through. They don't like the 23rd Psalm. They don't like Psalm 91.
These are specific Psalms that, like I said, that I've read up on them after you talked to me about them, and they are, I would say that they are prayers, like I said, not just of hope, but of faith, where you're asking for an outside power. You're kind of creating an internal safety mechanism by asking for help. I say God or whatever one wants to call it.
So they can see for themselves the reaction that the voices have to that. The voices don't like the 23rd Psalm. They don't like Psalm 91, and they don't want them to repeat it. So most of these guys, they're not religious to start with. So they have to write it down. If they don't write it down, they'll forget it. So these things can interfere with your memory. They can blot things out. So, even today when I'm giving, patients, okay, these are the things you can do to fight back. I have them write them down, because if they don't write them down, they'll have forgotten 85% of that stuff by the time we're done talking. And what I found is when I was working in the, in the prison, I'd tell the prisoners, well, carry it around in your pocket. And they would forget to carry it around. They'd lose it. And then they'd forget to use it. So the voices would make them forget that. And then the administration in the prison found out that I was handing this stuff out. So I started handing them out. Here, use this stuff.
Right.
Found out I was handing them out. I was ordered to stop.
Did you ever find anybody who was Muslim and using any of the Muslim prayers, or was it?
Yeah. Matter of fact, there is I have one here that I thought was pretty cool. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, the same thing worked with Muslims. They seem to be more aware of these negative entities than us Christians. Even though, and that's one thing that amazes me. In the Bible, 23 times, it talks about Jesus casting out these demons. And yet, it's not brought up in any of the church services. It's not a big deal in the Christian faith, and here it is, 23 times he's talked about it over and over and over again. You bring something like this up to psychiatry or psychology, they think you're a wacko. There is no spiritual anything in psychiatry or psychology. None. Zero. Nothing. It's all secular horse crap. And what's I'll get in to get me started on psychiatry. Okay, so this is a Muslim prayer, and it goes it's chapter 114 of the Quran, and it's directed directly at the psychotic voices. It goes, in the name of God, the gracious, the merciful, say, I seek refuge in the Lord of mankind, the King of mankind, the God of mankind, from the evil of the sneaky whisperer, which is really interesting.
Wow.
These things actually do kind of whisper.
Very direct.
They hear him, who whispers into the ears of people from among the jinn and among the people. Okay? The jinn are the demons for them. That's just their name for the demons. So they're aware that these things speak through the mind. So one of the first things, there are two things that these people need to recover, and this goes for intrusive thoughts too, negative intrusive thoughts. They need to understand that those voices do not come from them. They come from somewhere else. It's not them. Now, the demons, the voices, want them to believe that what they're hearing is their own thoughts. And we're taught from the time we're kids that every thought that goes through our minds belong to us. That's far from the truth. Now there's Manuel Swedenborg said none of your thoughts are your own. And then there was a German guy who said the same thing. I forgot what his name was. He said the same thing. None of your thoughts belong to you. You're the one who chooses, what you want to hear, the thoughts you want to listen to. So they have to understand that those thoughts aren't theirs. So the mind, according to Mace, the mind is something different. But how psychology thinks of the mind, it's like those don't originate in our minds. The psychotic voices don't originate there.
Well, it's interesting too that I had thousands of comments, and it was from all walks of life, from all over the world, that had their own perspective on their own dark voices or what they thought of them, and a lot of them, they attach themselves to the thoughts, and then I would always normally reply, that's maybe how I used to think, but I look at myself now as the space in between the thoughts. And it almost shut them down. Like that was one of those things where it kind of made too much sense after they put a couple of seconds into thinking about it. Like maybe I am the space between.
Yeah,
maybe
you are the space.
And that idea of identity and ego. Could you hold on 1 second? My internet must be slow. I'm gonna go try to shut down everything in my house real quick. Just give me.
I don't know. There's always a lot of interference when I talk about this stuff. It's almost expected at this point. Now it's become regular. If I can get through a podcast without interference, it's almost amazing.
And I did have a question on so Heaven and Hell. You got Manuel Swedenborg and his kind of version, which is kind of intense. It's a very interesting book on kind of the whole system that we live in. And the other book you recommend, 30 Years Among the Dead, that was a little more friendly.
It's a lot of people have trouble with Swedenborg, man. I picked it up and I just read it. I read it until I almost dropped. I couldn't put it down. I sat there, I cut through it like a knife through hot butter, and must have read it, 50 times after that. It's just, it made so much sense.
Well, with the ideas of the 30 Years Among the Dead, a lot of, he talks about our people stuck in between worlds, or their soul stuck in the afterlife, and that concept. Yeah. How much of the entities or the dark entities do you think are people stuck in the afterlife? Are they two different groups? Are they both?
Yeah, there's three different groups. Four. One are aliens. Another are they've never lived a human life. Yeah.
Right.
A great majority of them are people who have not moved on into the light. Okay, and they will just attach to I remember one guy at the prison was hearing a voice. Turned out to be a guy who died on a motorcycle, and he was out of his body going, okay, what now? He saw this guy, the prisoner, who was driving his motorcycle by at some point in time, and he jumped in there and got in there with him because he was a motorcycle rider. There's mothers who get into their daughters because they don't want to leave them. These are kind of earthbound souls, and
Right.
most of them they're not malicious. They don't know where to go. They're trapped, and
They're confused.
They're confused. They're trapped. They haven't moved into the light, or they're attached to some place like a house, or they're attached to some person, and they get stuck in there, and they can't get out. Now, the ones that I deal with the most are the ones that cause people to be psychotic. Those are demonic.
The dark, right?
They're the dark voices. They were assigned to attack a particular person.
So have you had experiences, Jerry, where they go through the Mace method, they're using a lot of the protocols where they just won't go away? Like these entities are stuck, where you have to do something extra. Is there extracurricular you do for certain extreme measures?
Yeah, where the Mace thing comes in real handy is clearing out all the garbage. Because what they do is the reason they're consistently negative, which was one of the first patterns I saw when I was working at the state hospital. These things they're constantly negative. So that was the population I was working with, is the schizophrenics, and I was wondering what holds these voices on such a negative pattern. Why don't they drift off into positive stuff or neutral stuff or anything in between? Why are they consistently negative? What holds them to that pattern? So that was the very first pattern that I found. The second pattern that I found is they're anti-religious. They don't like the Bible. They don't like preachers. They don't like the guy going to church. They don't like him reading religious or spiritual stuff. What kind of hallucination would be anti-religious? And that's what the psychiatric mafia is saying. Oh, these things are hallucinations. They're auditory and visual hallucinations. And they have no research to back that up at all. They're like the old Egyptian priest. We hereby declare that they are this because we say so. And we completed all this college where they don't mention any of this stuff. They don't talk about negative spirits. They're anti-religious themselves. I mean, they just, spirituality doesn't play into their concept of the universe. It just doesn't. They're dishing out drugs. And now they got the doctors under such control now that they can't spend any time with people. They're allowed on, you got to spend 10 minutes with each person. They don't have any time to spend with the people. So the whole system is set up to sell drugs, to drug the entire populace. And you turn on the TV, 75% of the friggin' ads on the TV are for some kind of drug. The deep state wants us all drugged senseless. And a lot of these drugs they're very dangerous. The antipsychotics are some of the most dangerous drugs used in medicine today. They have horrible side effects. They actually, with long-term use, they will shrink the brain. They'll rot out the peripheral nervous system. And then what the psychiatrists do, once those symptoms start appearing from the toxicity of the drugs, they'll prescribe another one that masks those symptoms. So they'll throw cogentin in there or something else that masks the symptoms of the nervous system reacting to the drug's toxicity. So here's the person being poisoned by these drugs, but they're no longer feeling it because they masked that stuff with some other drug. So, that was discovered a while back, where they started doing autopsies on state hospital patients, and they saw that their brains were shrunk.
Yeah, I put a post up about that with about 7 different researchers that used studies between 2003 and 2013, and the amount of people that commented about their own cognitive dysfunction or dysfunction after the use of a lot of these drugs, and they would just list them and some of their symptoms. I was blown away, how common it was.
It's horrible, and the psychiatrist won't tell them, how dangerous these drugs are. They'll go, oh yeah, what they commonly say is, well, your eyes will get blurry for a while, your mouth will be dry, there'll be some sexual dysfunction, you'll be groggy, for a little while, but after 2 weeks you'll kind of get used to it, and so a lot of that will go away. These people don't stay on these drugs. Their compliance rate is horrible. They don't like them. And they have such a grip on the control of those things. You know, it's
right.
They don't want anybody else prescribing them. No general doctors, no other medical practitioners. They are the experts when it comes to these drugs, and they don't like anybody else prescribing them. But you look at what they do. You know, I think I told you last time is they back in the 70s, they came up with when Prozac came out, they had already blown through. They blamed mothers for schizophrenia to start with. The mothers, it's something the mothers did. They raised their kids wrong way. It's their fault. You know, you could check that out. I mean, people could see for themselves that some kids that were raised relatively normally, there wasn't any major traumas or stuff like that. They became psychotic after a while due to something else. So people could see, they could check that out for themselves. So they had to come up with something that people couldn't check out for themselves. They didn't have a reason. They didn't know why those drugs worked. They didn't have a cause for schizophrenia. And that looked pretty awkward. You mean you're treating something that you don't know what it is? Yeah. Well, that's kind of odd, isn't it? Well, yeah, the studies show this, So they paid for the studies. They paid for the results they wanted. They didn't let it be published in some of the major journals, that anything that went against their opinion of what caused schizophrenia. They paid off everything. They paid off the medical schools. They paid off the universities.
I think they even pushed the media in narrative, even with the movies and shows, that you're a crazy person if you hear voices. Right. You're schizo. There's such a stigma that yes. If you heard any voices, you're about to go loony bin. You're going to get drugged for life. So that in itself, nobody's looking into that conversation at all. No, you're marked as soon as you were to say something like that.
Matter of fact, I read one from a book from she was kind of like a semi-famous professor in some big university, I think in New York. And the New York Times put this on their top of the listing list, this book. And I read it, and basically what it said was this poor lady would use these drugs. They were horrible. They affected her in negative ways. She hated them, so she went off them, several times, and then the voices came back. At one time, she even called them demons, but that wasn't covered much. So she got to the point where she goes, well, I can't stay sane without these things. That was the end result. I read that and I went, what a bunch of bullcrap. What a bunch of propaganda. And this was on the New York Times bestseller list. I'm sure they were behind that. They wanted to think that there's nothing else that works except these toxic medications. Those drugs that they use don't cure anything. None of those psychiatric drugs cure anything, nothing. All they do is suppress psychotic and other psychiatric symptoms. They cure nothing. But the antipsychotics do damage. They do permanent neurological damage with extended use. And when they found that out, these researchers who were doing autopsies on these state hospital patients who had been fed these things for years, they published that, and the big pharma and the psychiatric mafia went nuts. Oh no, it's not our drugs. It's not. It's the schizophrenia. And so they tried to blame it on the schizophrenia. They didn't even know what schizophrenia was, but they were blaming it on it. And then some of the more rational researchers just weren't buying it. So they started feeding these drugs to monkeys and mice. And they found that it was the same thing. They caused the same neurological damage in the rats, mice, and monkeys. So they are dangerous, but the psychiatrist won't tell the patient that.
It also works in the business side of it, where if you're damaging somebody who you already has stigma as being a crazy person, who's going to believe the crazy person?
Oh, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. They've taken their voice.
Yep.
They've taken their voice. That's why I'd like to come on with some of these people who recovered and give them a voice. Let them talk about what it was like to deal with psychiatry, what it was like to deal with the voices. They don't have a voice. They complete, like you said, they're crazy. You can't listen to anything they say.
I think that was the hardest part with I said we talked about the veterans last time, is it's just that stigma. It's only after we've talked about our own experiences or somebody else has talked about dealing with dark voices or dark thought patterns, and where they start to open up and go, wow, I'm not the only one. You kidding me? Like, this isn't just me. And then like you talked about it, and how you detach yourself from the voice and learning that you're not your voice. That voice that's going on all the time. You can have thoughts that are yours, but you can also have thoughts that are not yours.
Right. And Sherry Sweeney, my co-author on the book we wrote, she's been there. She fought with them for years, and she found her own way to fight back with them, and that was the That's a Lie program. So your listeners can go to my website at jerrymarzinsky.com and then go to articles, and under the articles section there's a bunch of articles, but one of those articles is the That's a Lie program. That's the single most effective freestanding free program. We put it up to anybody can go and get it, that will start to knock down the voices. because you can't, what I found out early, that you can't ignore them. They get louder. So what you resist persists.
Right.
It's like it digs in when you try, and that's what psychiatrists are telling these people. I've heard it over and over and over again. Oh, they're hallucinations, just ignore them. They're not real. And I remember the first time I checked that out, I was sitting in a psychiatry meeting with one of my patients on my caseload. And at the finish, he complained about the voices. Of course, the psychiatrist upped his meds again. You complain about them, and they learn that real quick too. You go to the psychiatrist and you complain about the voices, that they're still not gone. They'll just keep upping those meds until you're a drooling idiot. I had one last week. I mean, she was so drugged up, I couldn't even talk to her. Wow. It was ridiculous what they did. And I've seen that all the way along. I mean, it's just, that's all they know how to do is just push drugs.
And with the Mace method, even if somebody is drugged up, can you still have a good experience from that? So say you are, because I've heard a lot of people that get put on lithium, like these heavy dosages of high.
Well, lithium has to be maintained at a certain blood level balance for it to work at all. If it drops below that balance, it doesn't work. Okay, and lithium is prescribed for bipolar or manic depression. And what it does is it's just like an attenuator. So you have your highs and lows. It cuts out the highs, it cuts out the lows, and you just get the blah, but it stops the manic episodes for the most part. And, there's a bunch of different kinds of bipolar stuff, but it doesn't affect you like the antipsychotic drugs do. Matter of fact, it's almost not, it's not near as noticeable,
Right.
I'm not sure they have any idea why that works either. But what you got to watch out.
Subtle.
Yeah, it's more subtle. What you got to watch out for is in the summer when it gets hot, people on lithium start sweating. So their water content goes down. The lithium content in their bloodstream goes up, and it can become toxic. So they got to be careful about that. So the Mace method would work probably fine with bipolars on lithium. With the others, I mean, the one last week I had, I couldn't use the Mace method on them. They were just too worked out.
You can't break through at that point. They're not them at that point.
They were just out of it.
Yeah.
If the drugs are at a certain level, you still can. And I'm not saying those drugs don't have their use. They do have their use.
Right. Yeah, we've said that before.
Yeah.
It plays a part, but it can't be the whole scenario. It can't be the whole change. It needs to be a balance of other things to help.
Right. Because they're not going to cure anything. Those drugs cure nothing. Absolutely nothing. None of them cure anything.
The idea would be to reduce the symptoms so you could put something into effect, right? I mean, that's kind of like the idea of it.
So they lower the voices so they you can reach them. Otherwise, there's a number of patients I wouldn't have been able to reach, if they weren't on that.
So in the middle of attacks, because I had a lot of people, like most of the questions were, like, how do I deal with this? Or I'm dealing with this right now. What was the quickest way? So if you're not doing the Mace method for the trauma, but you're in the middle of a intrusive thoughts, you went with That's a Lie program and also Psalms. So we're, positive prayers.
The first thing they have to realize is that those voices aren't their own.
Right. Okay. They've gotten to that point. So they're asking now, what do we do? I know they're not my thoughts. What are my best options?
So how would you think they would tell their thoughts apart from the thoughts of these entities? How would they figure it out?
I don't know.
Yeah, that's critical. You can't figure out what's your thoughts and what's their thoughts. You're screwed. So that's the first thing that's got to be done is one, these thoughts are always negative, and they're negative against you. They're negative against the person. They're also negative against other people. They want to divide the person away from everybody else. They don't want them to have any good relationship with their mother, their father. They'll tell them all these lies about their mother and their father. With married folks or dating folks, they'll tell the woman that the man's cheating on them. They'll tell the man that the woman's cheating on them. They don't like relationships. They don't want them. What they want is the person to lock themselves in their bedroom and not talk to anybody else except them. Okay. So any negative thought that comes through your mind about yourself or anybody else doesn't belong to you.
So that's that red flag. You start noticing that negative pattern. One of the red flags.
One of the red flags is the second one is intent. Is what they're telling the patient to do the patient's intent? Does he want to do that? Lots of times they're listening to the voices, and the voices are telling, hey, attack this guy, do this, do that to him, scream out, curse him out. They have to ask themselves, is that their intent? Do they really want to do that? Or is that the intent of some other force?
So as soon as they confirm that it's not theirs, it's a negative force. It's one of these negative patterns. Is it go into that's a lie and you just continue that in repetitive motion for a while till you feel a shift, or you're in the middle of it? So what do you suggest, or what do you?
So you got those things. Now, if the voices are very strong, okay, what they want to do is overwhelm the person. And what's so sneaky about them is they sound, most of the time, they sound just like the thousands of other thoughts that you have go running through your head on any particular day. You know, there's no change in timbre or them go or anything like that. It sounds just like regular thoughts. You know, not always, but most of the time. You know, and I've had patients tell or ask the voices. I mean, lots of them. Who are you? What are you? And you know what? Guess what they would say? What do you think they would say?
I'm you.
Yep, that's exactly what they say. I'm you. No, but it's not I'm. It's we. If there's more than one, they'll say we are you, which gives them away. You know, lots of times there's more than just one. You know, if it's one, they could say I am you, which might be more believable. But when they say we are you, I mean, that kind of screws things up a little bit. You know, so they get punished if they're discovered. You know, there's a hierarchy of them. You know, and they have supervisors, and they're assigned to destroy a certain person. You know, that's their task, and they're told that if you don't destroy this guy, you will cease to exist. That's what they're told by their upper.
Joe, you just broke up, and that part was amazing. Could we repeat that one more time? You were talking about the hierarchy. Could you repeat that one more time? They do, I know they don't. I know they don't want nobody hearing that. That there's a boss on top managing this customer because they need their loosh. So
that's interesting to cut out at that particular point. You know?
Oh, it was money. I was like, you guys are good. You guys are not playing around.
So yeah, there's a hierarchy of them. Okay, so there's different levels, and I've even had one where there was one girl who was hearing voices, and her voice wasn't mean enough. So it got removed and replaced by one that was meaner. Yeah, no lie.
They're efficient.
They're vicious. Yeah, there's a hierarchy. They're told that if they don't do what they're told, they will cease to exist. They're told that they don't have any light in them, you know, which is a lie. You know, God created them just like He created everything else. You know, their light is very dim. You know, and when you travel with them into that light, it's more like a coal on a fire. You know, it's a dim red light. And what you can do if you can get them to walk into that light and ask for help, you know, to go to say. So what I do is set them up. Now this is after all the Mace stuff. Okay, you hit the Mace stuff, remove all the garbage that you can. They're still there. Then you have to go directly after them. Okay, and it's like so the voice starts talking. You say, okay, what's your name? Usually it won't answer. Then if it says anything back, then it has communicated with me, which is not permitted. That's against their rules. Okay, so you ask them like, when did you get into this guy? You know, well, I got him out at a certain time. I mean, you can talk to them, you can carry on conversations with them, but they're not nice. They're not very nice. They're not somebody you want to voluntarily talk to. You know, so you know, once they answer that, you go, well, were you told that you know, you have no light in you? Were you told that if you don't destroy this person, you're going to be in trouble? Yeah. Were you told you don't have any light in you? Yeah. You know, I don't have any light in me. And you go, well, how do you know? We said, well, let's go look. Okay. So we'll go and just take the trip with them and go, okay, let's go look. And the patient and me, and we'll go together and we say, do you see the light yet? No, it's just dark. Okay, let's go further. Let's keep looking. You know, you see it yet? No, I don't see it yet. Okay, let's go further. I said, let me know when you see it. And they go, oh, I see it. I see a dim red light. Now, what surprised me was that when they saw that, they got furious at the bosses that told them they had no light.
They lied to them.
And that made no sense because they're the epitome of liars themselves. I mean, 99% of what they say is lies. You know, but yet they're mad because they got lied to. You know? So if you can walk them into that light and ask for somebody they trust to come and pick them up, if that entity comes, and it could be a dog or a horse or a grandmother or an ex-wife or somebody that loved them, usually a mother, and if they trust them and leave into the light with them, that voice is gone.
Wow.
Now let them get rid of the rest of them, but it gets rid of that one.
Where did you?
And they don't come back. You're breaking up. something doesn't want you talking.
You shifted their perception. Yeah, it's pretty bad.
You just went to.
No, sir.
They wiped you out there.
Where did you find this, Jerry? Like that part is so transformative. I mean, it's deep. I mean, there's so many different ways you can go with that conversation of, you know, they find the light, a light. What was that? Did you hear that from somebody else? Did you hear some experience and you tried it and then you found success?
I heard it from somebody else. There's hold on. I know where it is. I'll go find it.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, here it is.
Spirit release therapy, William Baldwin. Spirit releasement therapy, William J. Baldwin. Wow.
Now this ought to be a manual for anybody who's working with schizophrenics. They need to read that.
Wow. It makes you think, though, that like the universe just has levels that we're not aware of.
Yeah.
And the possibilities are endless. We can change so much of the reality that's around us, and changing spirits. I mean, or something that's in a dark energy pattern, giving it a chance to see its own light. I mean, wild.
Yeah. And then walking it into the light and away from the person.
And you said once you have that experience with them, that one's particularly gone. Do you find that they will replace them, like a hierarchy? The management's like, oh yeah. No, we like this one.
Just like the magazine on a rifle,
right.
You get rid of one, and another one will pop up. So you got to fill that space with something, and what they call it is the healing light meditation, where you imagine a bright white light filling yourself, with mirrors on the outside of you, and there's no getting around it. You have to start moving on a positive spiritual path, because just like the Bible says, you clean out that room of all these things. If you don't fill it with something, they will come back with their friends. And I've seen that happen over and over again, because being cured from schizophrenia isn't like being cured from an infection where you take a pill and the infection goes away and it's gone. It's not that way. If you don't keep moving on a positive spiritual path, they'll come back, and they'll come back in droves. It'll be much harder to get rid of them the second time. It's not like you're healed forever once you get rid of one of them. No, it doesn't work that way. It's just like a clip on a rifle. You fire one round, another one comes up and ready to take its place. They have the same thing.
Right. It seems that there's so many different religions and and different groups of spirituality where they talk about that white light. And I mean, for me, I almost like the idea with the Mace Method, but it's almost like you're keeping yourself at a certain energy, a certain frequency. It is not what they're looking for. It's not what the dark energies are looking for. Is that way to look at it?
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. It's like your mind is like a radio. Okay, it picks up different stations. So if you took a radio back to 300 years ago or something like that, they hear this voice in there, and they're going, "What's that?" Where's it? Somebody's trapped in there. And they go, "Well, I can hear it talking. I can hear it talking." You get a hatchet and you cut it open. You look for the guy who's talking, and it's not there. It's a similar thing. The radio beams come from the outside in, just like your thoughts come from the outside in. And you're the one who tunes the station. So you're the one who decides, what thoughts you want to listen to. And
well, because some of the comments I got too, and people that were looking into some of the newer videos, was that they, in their mindset was that all the voices are good, like they're positive voices. So it's like
oh no.
So that's,
there's some things that say, "Oh yeah, you got to learn how to live with them." No, there's no living with them. They're going to be draining their parasites. They're going to be draining you. I know there's this one big thing out there. I don't know what one big organization that kind of teaches you how to live with them. There's no living with them. It's like living with a freaking rattlesnake. It doesn't work that way. There's no. They're going to be draining you no matter what you do. They feed off of your energy. They're parasites, and so do these spirits who are encased in you, that get trapped in you. They're also feeding off of your energy. They're changing your personality. So a lot of times you hear somebody gets their heart replaced, and all of a sudden, a food that they normally hated, they're craving now. Stuff like that. I mean, it changes the personality.
So it's a continuous recovery pattern that you need to keep. I mean, you can't. It's not something that you just get fixed. You have to keep it up, work on it,
right?
And you're pursuing a different life path at this point, right? I mean, it's almost like you're creating a life pattern. Is that?
Yeah, pretty much. You don't want to stay on that same pattern with the voices. So once you're able to identify what they are, I mean, that's the first one. They're consistently negative. They're anti-religious. They create negative emotion. They energetically drain their victims. They get louder after sunset. They get louder when they're ignored. They foster self-destructive behavior. They foster isolation. They demand attention. They maneuver for increased control. They gaslight. They manipulate perception. So, a schizophrenic could be walking down the street and a bunch of people laugh across the street, and the voices tell them they're laughing at you. The prisoners used to use them as torpedoes. They tell a paranoid psychotic patient, "Hey, that guy in the other gang is they're mocking you, they're planning to hit you. You better get them first." And they would actually force them off of their medications to keep them psychotic, because they get supernaturally strong when they're in a psychotic state, just supernaturally strong. So they use them to attack other gang members. Now, another thing that's interesting, they have complete access to the schizophrenic's memory, because they're energetic. they can go in there and they can access your entire memory. Every rotten thing you've ever done, they can bring up and throw in your face to generate that negative emotional energy that they feed off of. So that's where Mace comes in. You go in there and you clean all that out.
So you're not triggered as such, because that was a common question that I got all over the place, was that how do they know my memories? And then how much, because they had that same experience where they could pull up memories that nobody else should know, that nobody else should have access to. But then if you think about it, we're energy beings. Yes. And all of our memories are in place. If we look at our DNA, it's like having thousands of computers in one DNA strand.
All those memories are energetic, and yeah. These the voices are members of the energy universe that operates by different rules than we have here in the physical universe. Right. Where they are, there is no space, there is no time, there is no matter. So they can go into your memory and they can pull out every rotten thing you've ever done. And I remember one patient that it was like he owed somebody a dime, 20 years ago, and they'd come up and they go, "You robbed the dime off of this guy." A fellow that I talk to all the time, that I bring on interviews every once in a while, who beat them. With him, they were telling him that when he was putting worms on a hook, that he was torturing those worms, that he was and that he's rotten because he was putting worms on a hook to catch fish. Stuff like that. They don't care what they tell you as long as they generate that negative emotional energy.
They're looking for that reaction. They want the results.
They want the reaction. They don't want a response. They want a reaction. They're consummate liars. They lie about everything. You can't trust anything they say. I've had 3 patients where they were told that if you gouge your eye out, we will shut up and we won't come back. Okay? 2 of them did that. And soon as they gouged their eye out, the voices came back and, "You stupid fool! How could you listen to us? Now you disfigured yourself for life. Now you're a freak. Everybody's going to be watching you and laughing at you. They just went in there and poured gasoline on the fire." That's what you're dealing with. They're like bullies. They knock you down and they just keep kicking. And they hit us all to different degrees. The schizophrenics are the worst. But I remember one time I was out in the backyard here in Arizona that most people don't have lawns. You go out with a machete and you cut down the cactus to keep them from overrunning the place. So I was out there with the machete cutting cactus, and I have this beautiful husky, pure white husky, and she runs by, and here's this voice just barges in my head: "Cut her head off." What? I felt bad just even thinking about it. It's like I was upset just hearing that. So they got me there. I was talking to a preacher who was standing on the edge of the Grand Canyon. This guy was, about the most saintly guy I've ever met. And here's standing on the edge of the Grand Canyon, and the voice comes and goes, "Hey, just jump, driving down in traffic, they'll say, 'Hey, why don't you just drive into oncoming traffic?' Or, 'I wonder what it would be like if you drove into oncoming traffic.'" So they hit us all to different degrees.
Right.
But they're consummate liars. They don't keep any bargain that they make. You can't make a bargain with them. You can't trust them for anything. Right. They consistently steer their victim away from anything that might generate joy. They don't want them watching anything funny. They don't want them feeling good. They don't want them feeling pleasant or like they're in control. They can manipulate their feelings without having done anything. You could just be sitting there, and this has happened to me. You're just sitting there enjoying the day, and all of a sudden you get this big depressive feeling come over you. That's them. They short circuit reason. Boredom is bad. Boredom is one of the worst things that you could allow happen. They selectively make people forget stuff. They destroy any positive self-concept. They pull their victim away from consensual reality. They're pulling them toward a warped reality. Right. And once they hit a certain point, they're not coming back. I remember one guy, it took me like an hour to reach the person who was there. And that was probably the last human contact he ever had, because they had taken him.
Wow.
They're averse to anything positive or beautiful. And they're parasites. So
that's the patterns you're talking about, right? Like you said, you found there's like 23 patterns that they're.
Yep, 23. So anybody can check these out for themselves. It's if you're working with schizophrenics, if you have a family member who's schizophrenic, you can see these patterns for yourself. Now, the caveat is that if the voices are running patterns, they can't be hallucinations like the psychiatric mafia insists they are. They can't be patterns. Hallucinations don't run patterns, or they wouldn't be hallucinations.
Right, they'd be random. There'd be some random.
They're all over the place. So you're being told to lie by psychiatry because of what they think. They have no research into the voices at all. They don't ask any questions. They got that covered. Anybody who researches the voices is a crackpot. Can you imagine a psychiatrist? Yeah, the 2 times I got caught asking prisoners, these were mental patients back in the state hospital days, asking them about their voices and what they were being told. I got pulled up before in the chief psychiatrist's office, and blasted. I was told they are hallucinations. If you start asking questions about them, what you're doing is you're reinforcing the hallucinations and making the patient worse. I knew that was a crock of crap at the time. I'd already gone past that point. But they don't want you asking about. They don't want anybody finding out that these things aren't hallucinations, and they have done no research of their own. So, like the Egyptian priests of old, they go, "We hereby pronounce that the voices are hallucinations because we said so, and we're psychiatrists, and we got the MD degrees, and we went to school for years." Ask them if they were ever taught anything about the voices. Hell no. They never, they're auditory and visual hallucinations. That's it. They don't even give as much detail as what I give, in a regular talk. They have no idea what those things are.
But it almost seems like the allegory of the cave a little bit, where it's like, if you haven't seen it or experienced it, it has to be a lie. And so if these, the medical community's never experienced or seen any of this, it has to be a lie. It has to be something. It's made up. This person's crazy.
Right. And I'll bet you dollars to donuts, very few of them have actually taken any of the medications that they prescribe. I'll bet you.
I'll bet you that. I'm not going to take that one. That bet's not too good for me, though.
Back to your,
I'll lose that one.
Back to your question of what people can do for themselves, on this, is that the voices are so strong, and they're not, whether they're on medications or not, if they're so strong, they don't have a lot of control. You can get a rubber band to remind you to do these things. You can snap that rubber band, and that'll shut them up for a short period of time. 15, 20 seconds, enough for you to repeat, "That's a lie." That's a lie program. And the 23rd Psalm. Okay. They hate the 23rd Psalm. And then ask your guardian angels for help in getting rid of them. So those are the three things they can do for themselves. And if they work with the "That's a Lie" program, psychiatry tells them just ignore the voices. You can't ignore them, because what they're doing is resisting the voices when they ignore them. They're going, "I'm blotting you out," but it takes energy to blot them out. Okay. So, what you resist persists. So that's the opposite of what they should be doing. When you go, "That's a lie," that kind of deflects them. You're not resisting them. You're just going, "That's a friggin' lie. I'm not listening to the crap you're feeding me. I know it's a bunch of crap. No, I'm not going to take it into account." It's a lot different. It's a lot different. There's a major difference between that and resisting them. And then asking your guardian angels for help. And they're out there. I mean, believe me, I worked in the ER doing psych crisis for 10 years before I retired from that. And there were time after time after time where.
Well, it has to be an equal universe, right? It has to be some sort of balance, even, just as math goes, there's a positives and negatives, and negatives and positive, right? So if we have dark energy out there has to be light energy, and that's how the balance is. And so you can start focusing more on the light energy, which seems like that's what almost the path that you're trying to help people get back on, is right. To create more of that light energy. And
right. Where you put your attention.
Right.
So it's a battle for your attention.
Yes. Well, it makes sense if some people never recognize dark voices. If they were, say they were young and they kept themselves in a, let's say, highly spiritual path, and that they probably only heard a lot of light voices. Maybe they have dark voices on a few different occasions, but maybe not as most people do. If they had a higher vibration most of their life. I don't know, but I think in my mind there has to be a balance.
Yeah.
It can't just be all dark.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's like where people move to. You look at what you're being hit on television. By the time a teenager grows up, he's watched 25,000 murders on television. And then they go, "Oh, we got to take away the guns," but yet they're teaching them like, "Oh yeah, this is what you do when you get angry. You get a gun and you go shoot these people."
Yeah.
You got all these war heroes there where they glorify war until the person actually gets there and sees what a horror show it actually is. So they're taken in. That these poor veterans are going, "Oh yeah, it's an honorable thing to do. You're a patriot. You're you're a hero. It's a macho thing to do." And they brainwash them, and they join the service, and they find out what it's really about. They get into a shit show like over there in Ukraine right now, and they see for themselves. It's hell. It's hell.
Yeah. I think that's the hardest part. I think a lot of the guys that I've met, especially the older veterans that are still dealing with a lot of trauma, their feedback to me was that it just wasn't the men that they lost and the friends that they lost in the wars. It was the understanding that they lost them for corporate greed, or they lost them for reasons that weren't what they thought they were signing up for. Right. And that's what tears in their heart. And that there's no way to express that to the rest of humanity, because they've already, that mouthpiece is controlled by media. So they're proud of what they did. They were able to help their brothers in those positions, but I believe that from what they told, they felt lied to, that they were.
Well, they were lied to. You know, you won't see any of this on the mainstream media. So those of you who are listening to the mainstream media, you're being lied to day after day after day after day. But people are waking up. CNN is you know, they've moved out of their office. They laid off what 2,000 people or something like that.
Well, I think that's why they have to get rid of TikTok, because, you know, they keep portraying China a certain way, and they need to. It's a. I put your videos on Instagram, and I put your videos in short YouTube shorts, and I put them on TikTok. I get a couple hundred views, if that, on Instagram or Facebook or YouTube shorts. I put on TikTok, I get hundreds of thousands.
Why do you think that is?
I think they have organic reach. They're really trying to, like, they actually let the algorithm pick. People like it and they comment and they make they get a reaction. The algorithm's only going to respond if the consumer, the customer likes it. You know, they're paying attention. They listen to these long videos, and they're long videos. They're a couple minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes sometimes. They're paying attention. If they trigger it, they're going to continue on. I think with YouTube, Facebook, they have more agenda. You know, Google, they all have. They don't want certain information coming out.
Right. Exactly.
It doesn't push the narrative. And where it's TikTok, they don't care. I mean, I do think that obviously for the younger generation, they're pushing more dancing, and I think there probably is some sort of agenda that maybe China wants the youth to watch more kids dancing, and they have more educational videos in China. Okay, I see that. But if they're trying to get rid of it because there's a narrative that's spreading like wildfire with a different part of the community, or for the forces, you know, they're not going to CNN. Nobody. I mean, it's fallen off. Even nobody's going on to watch most of these newscasts anymore.
Yeah, this is strange. So, I know I don't have TikTok. I don't know hardly anything about it. You know, I watch some TikTok videos every once in a while, but I don't even know how to get on it or do anything with it. So it's strange that the TikTokers are listening to me, but I don't know anything about the platform that they're listening on.
I've helped other people set up channels. We got, you know, 4 or 5 channels I've helped set up, and our one interview, and like I think maybe like 6 or 7 videos, I've smoked them all. Like I haven't replied to anything. I still get people commenting every day, and I've helped people. There's a part 2 coming out, and it's information though that, you know, a lot of people aren't talking about. You know, and I also think, like you talked about before, it's not helping the medical community at all getting this information out. It's helping the patients. It's helping the actual society of humanity, but you're limiting their market share.
you look at the psychiatric mafia. You know, you take a look. There's more psychiatric drugs on the market now. That they're sloshing the market with psychiatric drugs. Everything under the sun that has ever existed on the face of the planet ever. And last year, 46,000 Americans killed themselves. They committed suicide. That's almost as many as died in Vietnam. Year after year after year. You call that a successful mental health system when this is happening? From 1999 to 2019, the suicide rate increased in the US by 33%. What the hell good are these psychiatric drugs? And what are they doing? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. You know, schizophrenics kill themselves at a rate of 3 to 5 times that of the general population, because the voices are telling them, kill yourself. You know, now what I couldn't figure is, like, okay, if the guy kills himself, then what do they feed on? I don't know the answer to that. You know, I don't know whether to take that guy and he's recruited into their mess, you know, as an evil spirit.
Right.
And he leaves. I don't know what happens after that. You know, I've never talked to anybody who was psychotic and came back to talk about it. So I have no idea, you know.
Well, that's an interesting question though, because you would think that there would be that there is a result that they get from that. You know, if they get that mission, you know, maybe they gain a soul, they gain somebody else who's on their team for a while, or they get stuck in that dark pattern, and they're stuck on Earth for a long time.
Well, I don't have an answer to that one. You know, so you got it. The schizophrenics. Now these are the worst off of virtually all the psychiatric diagnoses. 3 to 5% of them, or 3 to 5% above the general population rate, they kill themselves at. Psychiatrists' suicide rate is almost exactly the same.
Wow.
Psychiatrists' suicide at virtually the same rate. It's almost identical. So if you look at the stability of a population based on their suicide rate, psychiatry is on the bottom of the bunch. You know.
I mean, I gotta say, it was really. I mean, these conversations have always been great, Jerry. But I think having to see the variety of people that deal with this, and it's everyone. I've seen celebrities are following my account now. I don't want to get them in trouble, but yeah, I've had a reach out or send or private message comments where you're sitting there going like, "How these people are multimillionaires on top of their game in showbiz, and they're dealing with it. It doesn't matter. It affects everybody.
They're diagnosing 100,000 Americans with schizophrenia every year. 100,000.
Yeah.
And what are they doing for them? They're drugging them senseless. That's all they're doing. You know, take these drugs and shut up and get out of my face.
Well, I think that's what gets such a good response from people, is that most people haven't heard this information, you know, or not with any clarity, or not without like a religious agenda, you know, like, oh, you need to go pray more, go say the rosary again. Like, you know, like if you don't have an understanding what's really going on, you know, the Psalms don't mean much. You know, I mean, they'll work obviously if you're using them in that sense, but if people don't, like you said, if the first thing they do, if they don't detach themselves from the voice and make themselves the space in between the voice, or just understand that concept, you're stuck in it. You're stuck in it forever.
Right. You got to fight back. They have to fight back. You know,
well, I think
Psychiatrists spending no time with them. You ask them how much time they spend with a psychiatrist every time they see him. It's like 15 minutes. Yet psychiatrists are being assaulted at a rate far higher than virtually any other doctor. I saw that when I was working at the state hospital. They were always getting the crap pounded out of them. It wasn't the psych nurses. It wasn't the psychologists. It wasn't the regular nurses. The assault rate on psychiatry at the state hospital was virtually identical to the attendance staff who spent 24 hours a day with them. And I saw that and I go, what is going on here? Why are they, how are they pissing these people off bad enough in 15 or 20 minutes to get assaulted? What are they doing? I never saw them do anything that
right.
Now there were some when I was working in the private hospitals, they were arrogant.
I can imagine.
They got cocked, but what it was is the voices are telling these patients that they take into account the awful side effects of these drugs, which are toxic reactions to the drug. They're poisonous reactions to the drug. And they're telling these schizophrenics that the psychiatrist is poisoning. They're trying to kill them. And there you go. They go off.
Give them a reason.
Yeah. So that's schizophrenics aren't totally stupid. I mean, it's like they realize that if you tell a psychiatrist that you're hearing voices, he gives you drugs, and you keep telling him you're hearing voices, all you're going to get is more drugs until you're a drooling idiot. And it's like they'll try one. If that doesn't work, they'll try another. They'll try another until they find one that works best. And none of them work good. They don't cure anything, but they're making a fortune selling this stuff. The global sale in antipsychotic drugs has soared in 2021 has soared to $14.54 billion. And antipsychotic drugs.
Do you have any concern then with this new push, or it's not even new push, but for kids to be on Adderall, which is a different version of methamphetamine? I mean, does that bring any red flags to you?
Oh yeah, it brings the big red flags to me, because I've seen prisoners in the prison who started off on Adderall and Ritalin and ended up using meth afterward. So they've got 80,235 kids, as of a couple of years ago, on amphetamines, on Ritalin, on Adderall, and kids are, they're naturally hyperactive. They got a lot of energy. They run around screaming, hollering, all that kind of stuff. The real reaction to that when, somebody who really has ADHD, when you give them Ritalin, they calm down and fall asleep. But what kills me is they've got, 622,000 kids under the age of 5 on these psychiatric drugs.
Wow.
So as of 2017, over 1 million children in the U.S. under the age of 6 were on some kind of psychiatric drug. What's this doing to them? Especially the antipsychotics that are destroying their brains.
And do we know? Do we have the studies yet? Do we have the 30 years or 40 years of research?
They're not going to want that to come out, even if you have it. They're not going to want that. They're not going to fund that kind of study. They're not going to fund anybody who does that kind of study. And they're not going to. Whoever does that kind of study isn't going to be able to get it into the journals. They'll block that. So you got 85,000 kids on antipsychotic drugs, 85,143 on these super powerful drugs that are rotting out their brain and peripheral nervous system. You guys got to stop trusting these fools. They're in it for the money. They're not in it to help you out. And all you get from them is suppressed psychiatric symptoms. That's it. You're not curing anything.
Any negative feedback on cannabis use or say mushroom use? Have you seen it? I mean, I'm more neutral about those kind of things. So,
cannabis use, I know the voices don't like it.
I love it. Oh, that's good to hear.
They complain about it, because it calms them down, and there's no, what the voices want is you to take drugs that have a bad withdrawal effect. So you're really racked out when you're withdrawing. That's what they want. They want that negative energy. Cannabis doesn't do that. You just mellow out and there's no nasty side effects. You might that way, but it's not going to give them what they want. So it's kind of like almost a safe psychiatric drug to some extent.
Right.
As long as they don't put crap in it.
Right.
Now I have run into psych patients who were so unstable that cannabis would push them over. They couldn't handle it. But for the most part, the voices don't like marijuana. They want you to drink alcohol. And what they tell these guys is like, why are you taking these rotten psychiatric drugs, man? Look how they feel. Look at what they're doing to you. Why don't you go get some alcohol or go get some meth or some cocaine or some heroin? I mean, at least enjoy the drug when you're taking it. At least it'll calm you down better than this crap does. Why are you using this crap? So they go back to using that stuff again. So they got 389,000 kids on anti-anxiety drugs, and those are addictive.
Wow.
These people are not in it to help the population. These people are in it for money. They're not curing anybody. They're not helping anybody. They're not getting anybody better. They're not going after the problem, which John Mace called causism, because it goes after the cause of the problem and gets rid of the cause of the problem instead of drugging it. So if these 389 people went to a Mace therapist, they would come out of there cured. They wouldn't have to take this crap.
Well, I think some of just the understanding in causism is so eye-opening, and that how our minds are more like projectors. we're not carrying two thoughts. And this is proven too. You're not carrying two emotions in your mind at the same time. We talk about you can't be grateful and depressed at the same time. But he broke it down in such simple terms where I think that kind of information should be given out at elementary school level. Maybe not this advanced form, but
they should
so simple.
Yep, they should be using Mace in the legal system. They should be using it in the prisons. They should be using it in the mental health centers. People need to be trained in this. It works. It actually works. It's not like, I've got 4 years of undergraduate psychology, another 4 years of graduate school, 2 years in a PhD program. Nothing they've told me works. It's none of these psychotherapeutic theories work. They don't have a permanent effect. Mace does, but its concepts are so different from the psychiatric establishments. One is the psychiatric establishment's treatments are not based on any kind of spiritual anything. Nothing. Yeah. Same with psychology. It's like, hey, that's over there and this is over here, but we're spiritual beings. We're part physical. It's the spirit. It's the energetic being that runs these spacesuits that we're walking around in. You have to take that into effect, and Mace does do that. Their concept of the mind is very different from psychiatry and psychology's concept of the mind. Mace found that the mind's only function is to take pictures of where you put your attention. So wherever you put your attention, your mind takes pictures of whatever you're looking at. That's all it does. It's a stimulus response mechanism, like the keyboard on a computer. You push the key and you get a response from the monitor. It doesn't think. It doesn't analyze. It doesn't do any of that stuff. The spirit does that. It's the spirit that thinks. It's a spirit that analyzes. It's a spirit that does all the rationalizing. It has nothing to do with the mind.
I think that's the best part. That they're missing that factor, that third part. Like I said, they're not getting the results they want. There's a factor they're missing.
Oh yeah, and the spiritual thing for one is a big one. The other thing Mace discovered was that the mind can take a concept and form it into a picture. It can take an emotion and form it into a picture or an image. Now, energy flows from negative to positive. Electricity flows from negative to positive. That's the flow of energy, negative to positive. So you get a negative image and you focus your attention on it for a long enough time, that image will reduce. And what's happening is that energy is being drained from that image or that trauma, and it's going back to you. So that trauma will no longer, once it's drained, it will no longer trigger a reaction. It will trigger a response. So, the most horrible thing that you can think of has happened to a patient. They work through it with Mace. Okay, then one of the things you do at the end is you check. Okay, how do you feel when put yourself back into that situation again, where you're at this most horrible moment you've ever experienced after the process? How do you feel about it now? They go, well, okay, I still remember it, but it doesn't hurt anymore. There's no reaction anymore. It's more of a response. And it's the same thing with relationships. You can form those feelings into an image and then get rid of that image, and that reaction is gone also. And it's and like you said, it's fairly simple compared to a lot of this crap they teach in college. This psychoanalysis, all this garbage, that they push. I mean, it actually works. I mean, it actually works. And the Mace people have went through the Australian government and they showed them it works, and they showed no interest. It was like the prison. They show no interest in really helping these guys out. It's constant punishment. Punishment doesn't work. It just merely suppresses the behavior until the punishing stimulus is gone. And then the behavior, it's just like making up for lost time, shoots above baseline, back down to baseline, and stays right where it was to begin with. The prisons don't work. They don't work. These guys are coming out of prisons in worse shape than they ever went in, especially the psychotic ones. They're coming out not only psychotic, they're coming out hard, they're coming out criminals, they got criminal thinking. It's like a graduate school for criminals. A lot of guys go in there, they haven't done anything super bad, and they come out as super criminals. And they got people fooled. It's like, a prisoner escapes and it hits a newspaper, and they go in the city and they go, oh my God, this prisoner, he's a murderer, he killed, he's running loose in the neighborhood. You lock all your doors and get feared, get afraid. No, they're releasing dozens of prisoners every day into society after being locked up for years.
Yep.
Psychotic ones get 2 weeks worth of medicine and told, when you run out, go to the nearest emergency room. And they're not going to get any meds in an emergency room. They can't follow up with the meds, so they're not going to give them anything. So they're just dumping these guys back out on the street again. They closed down all the state hospitals. They closed down now they're private hospitals. And what they are is they're this giant fleecing companies that, what they do is they get in these guys who are psychotic, they put them on meds, they drug them up, they keep them as long until their insurance runs out. Once their insurance runs out, they kick them back out and go see a counselor. Kick them back out on the street again. They go out there for 5-6 months. They can't stand the side effects of those drugs again. They go off them. They go psychotic again. They come back into the emergency room. They're sent back out to the psych hospital again, and then they run another cycle over and over, each time fleecing these guys of thousands and thousands of dollars that they don't have. So they're fleecing the state and federal governments. They're fleecing the county governments. They're fleecing the United States. They're Medicare and they're fleecing them all with this crazy, and they're the ones that are getting rich by it. It's just this giant merry-go-round that just goes round and around and around. You know, each time they go into the mental hospital, they fleece them for everything they can get out of them, drug them up, and then kick them back out again. Their insurance runs out, they're back out on the street.
Well, makes a great business model.
It's a wonderful business model. You look at this, you know, the sale just from the drugs, global antipsychotic sales, $14.54 billion in 2021, expected to reach $15.5 billion by 2022. These are just an antipsychotic drug sales.
Yeah, they shouldn't be going up. If things are working, they shouldn't be going up. The budget should be going the other way. You got to stop looking at profit quarterly. Well, I thought the most enticing part of the Mace Method for somebody who's been through a really traumatic experience is that they don't have to do this repeat of the trauma. They don't have to talk about it in depth. They don't have to go into it and relive it, which almost all therapies do.
Yeah, and that's the way they treated it in the past. And all that does is rips it open over and over. It's like having a scab that you rip open over and over and over again. It doesn't heal. You know, you keep thinking about it over and over. Now, another thing that's really interesting with the Mace Method is the therapist doesn't even have to know what the trauma is. You don't even have to tell him. You know, you follow the procedure and it works anyway. You know, and a lot of clients just can't figure that. They want to tell you their entire story. Well, I want to tell. If you don't listen to my entire story, you just don't understand what's happened. I have to understand what happened. All I need to know is your reaction to it. You know, your feelings about it. That's all you need to know. Then you can discharge it from there, as long as they follow this instruction step by step. You know, if they're too gorked up to form an image, and I had one last week, a client, he couldn't form an image and he couldn't answer questions. He was just too, you know, the voices were too strong. He just couldn't handle it. He couldn't use Mace with him. All I could do was give him the basic information. This is what you do to fight back. You got to fight back. You can't just sit there and let them kick you. They're like bullies. You know, they'll knock you down and they'll just keep kicking until you get up and you start fighting back. You know, and this DSM crap of theirs too. This dictionary of psychiatric illnesses. You know, like, what is it? There's 360 something of them right now. All of them, every single one, completely made up, fabricated. They don't have a single test for any of them. They don't have a single lab test. They don't have any kind of test to say, okay, you've got bipolar, you've got schizophrenia, you've got, you know, this psychiatric disorder, that psychiatric. There's no test for them.
I mean, in the 50s, they still had being gay as a disorder.
Yep, being gay was a disorder. They had mental retardation as a mental disorder. I heard they had Southern Bell syndrome down there for a while. Now they've got transvestite dysphoria or something like that. You know, so they just make these things up. You know, I heard one psychiatrist talk about it like a tobacco sale. You know, the guy comes in, hey, I got a new psychiatric diagnosis. It's this, and these are the symptoms. And here, should we put it in the book? You know, and then Big Pharma comes up behind and creates some kind of drug that's supposed to treat it. You know, it's a scam. And 2/3 of the people on that board who put together this DSM, this Bible that they teach. When I was in the PhD program, it was a Bible. They wanted you to memorize that goddamn thing. You know, none of it's real. They've taken segments of human behavior and they pathologized them into these names that they made up, and then they assigned a number to them, like schizophrenia 303.56 or something like that, so they could do the billing for treatments, so they can do the billing for drugs. He's being treated for paranoid schizophrenia, the 303.56, these are the symptoms. And then they submit that to the insurance companies. And no wonder these medical costs are out of control. Look at this crap.
I mean, since the Flexner report, they've pretty much been able to create the best business model for medicine ever since. Less healthcare options, fewer centers to do research, and then just create a Bible religion type narrative. You know, science is the religion where you don't doubt what the doctors say, don't question them. They're your God, and just take their commandments as God.
And that's the experience I've had with psychiatrists my entire career. You don't question them. You know, you don't disobey them. They're the gods of the high priest of mental health, and not just here, throughout the whole Western mental health center. The whole system is like, you know, it's nuts. It's just it's insane what they're doing. You know.
I was going to ask you, Jerry. We had people that are all over the world. There's not a country that you haven't seen have this an influx of clients from, right? I mean, I've had comments that they say like, oh, certain areas are just good voices, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure there's a balance of good and evil everywhere in the world.
Well, the good voices, what I found, you know, generally is they don't speak unless the guy's on the verge of death. You know, they usually communicate in feelings and intuition. You know, they are not allowed to barge in there and say, do this. You know, they just don't do it. They're not allowed. They're not allowed to interfere with the person's free will. Now, I have seen them barge in there where, I mean, some of the most dramatic cases was when I was working in the emergency room, you know, where these guys should have been dead. I mean, these people were sitting before me and they should have been dead. I mean, by all logical reason. There was this one lady, everything was going wrong with her. She lost her job. She was about to get thrown out of her apartment. She got a divorce. She had no support. She had a teenage kid. Everything was going wrong. So she decided, okay, I'm done. I'm gonna go out. I'm gonna drive my car in front of a train. So she went down to one of the small towns in Arizona, waited for the train to come. Here she was talking on the phone to her sister, telling her goodbye. She drugged herself up. She had alcohol. She was all worked up. Drunk silly. Here comes the train. She hung up with her sister. She drove the car right in the middle of the track and stopped. And the train just smacked her, threw the car over into another track, and where another train was coming. And that one here also smacked her again and threw the car 50 yards off of the railroad. It just threw it out. It was such a crumpled piece of metal that she couldn't get out. They had to cut her out. So she had to sit there for hours until they cut her out of there. So here she comes strolling into the emergency room, and I'm reading the report, attempted to commit suicide, hit by 2 trains. And I'm like, what? And she's sitting there before me with a black eye. That's it. A black eye. And I'm like, what? Right away, I'm like, whoa. I started hitting her with questions. Well, what happened when you woke up and you saw you were still alive? She said, I was furious. She said, I was absolutely furious. I did not want to be here. I wanted to be dead. I wanted to be gone. I didn't want to be here. Yeah. And she said, then she felt this just calm peace come over, and a voice came and said, everything's going to be fine. And she knew everything was going to be fine. I mean, it was just knowing, they cut her out of there. Here she comes into the emergency room, sits down, and she tells me this story. And I'm just like looking at her like, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. So I didn't see she was suicidal. It wasn't that many red lights off with me, but I didn't think I'd ever be able to get that past psychiatry. So I wrote it up and I said, I don't see her suicidal anymore. They let her out. So another guy had a 357 Magnum, put it to his head, flick, put it at the floor, bang, flick, bang. What are the chances of that happening? 2 rounds didn't go off. He goes, okay, I got it. Another guy had 45. He had a missile. It hit the firing pin. The round didn't go off. Next day, he went to the range. He put that same round in, pulled the trigger, and it went off. Another fella, he's had it. He goes, okay, I'm going to kill myself. He decided to gas himself with the stove. He had a gas stove in there. So his sister would come and visit him like twice a year, and that was it. So he turns on the gas stove. He's passed out. Sister comes in. There's no response. She opens the door, sees him in there laying on the floor. What's the chances of that going? She comes twice a year. Another guy, he decided to go hang himself. So he took a rope, went way out in the middle of nowhere, in the boonies, was standing on a stump, put the rope on a tree, wrapped it around his neck, kicked the thing out from under him, and he's hanging there when a hunter comes out of the woods and cuts him down. There's guardian angels out there. Everybody has at least 2. And I've seen it. I mean, I've seen it over. I should have wrote these stories down because they were like lobsters used to be. They were so plentiful that I only remembered the most dramatic of the bunch, but there were hundreds of them.
That actually would be a pretty good book. Guardian Angel stories.
Yeah. I didn't think of it. I didn't think of it at the time. But they're out there. So that's why I tell the schizophrenics, you pray and ask them for help. And that's for everybody. You got at least 2 of them. People who have more responsibility have more, but they're there. They can't barge in and do things. And they speak in serendipity too. Like you're driving along and somebody comes along with a bumper sticker that says something that triggers, a response that, oh yeah, that's the answer to my question kind of thing. So watch out for serendipitous stuff happening because it doesn't happen the way you think it would.
I think the understanding of what this world offers and what is even possible, it changes your reality. It changes your ability to enjoy your life and to take your blessings. But if you don't have an idea of what's going on or possible, the good and the bad, you're kind of stuck in. They call it the Matrix. You're kind of stuck in this game. It's not meant for you.
Yeah, and you look at the deception going on here. I mean, deception is everywhere. Like we were talking about that, that book, the China symptom, the China study. I mean, that should be everywhere. Like you said, it should be. Everybody should read that. That should be a text. That should be a textbook in high school. Yeah. I didn't ever hear of it until last night when I was watching YouTube.
Yeah, no,
I on YouTube. It was a documentary. That's what it was. It was a documentary.
Really? Yeah. I remember Dr. Bruce Lipton. He writes about epigenetics and metaphysics a little bit, and he did all these studies that pissed off a lot of the medical community because he was showing how genetic causing of diseases. There's no proof. There's no proof whatsoever that genetics create. You could be more susceptible, but there's no direct causation. It's 99.9% like environment and how you and your belief system. That was the wildest part, is that how your beliefs and your belief patterns changes how your genes express themselves. And I'm going, you got to be kidding me. This guy he was a proclaimed atheist. This guy said I was an atheist. Now he's more into, he's changed his views. He's, more spiritual about things. But he's like, it was the science that made me change my mind. It was these research papers that were, the evidence was staggering.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's not a good business model if people heal themselves.
No, that's right. And, they even showed in that documentary how these special interest groups, like the cattle people, voted against they're doing a, it was in Kentucky. They tried to make it like an educational thing for the people. You know, that people need to know this. That they need, and the cattle people blocked it. You know, they didn't want that getting out. The candy people blocked it. They didn't want it getting out. You know, these special interests did everything they could to block it. You know, so that it wouldn't get out. I mean, and then the lies on mainstream media, lie after lie after lie after lie. You know, just bold-faced lies. And then this fool we have for a president. I mean, my God, the guy's close to retarded. How could people be taken in by this? I mean, how could they be taken in by this?
It's wild. It is absolutely wild.
It's a wild ride. It's a wild, and it's going to get wilder from what I'm hearing.
I think it's about to. Like there's too many things in the car in work right now that it's.
Oh yeah, it's coming to a head. It's all coming to a head right now.
Very fast. Like I said, that's why for me, I'm trying to get this information out as fast as possible, because I don't know how long before they shut up, try to shut all this information out, or it helps create a tipping point where everybody knows too much and then they have to deal with it. You know, they have to deal with this new reality of people understanding. But I do appreciate the time. I'm trying to keep myself in that mindset. As I said, I appreciate this time, because it's a time of change, and we'll see what kind of change.
You know, if you want later on down the line, I have one fellow who he's now a mechanical engineer. Working as a mechanical engineer, he's married, he has kids, a normal life. But there was a period of time, like 20 years ago, where he went psychotic, and he was locked into a mental hospital. You know, and he was kept there, and he fought his way back. And his story is fascinating. You know, so I've already had him speak on YouTube. I've had him speak on Rumble, you know, all those things. But TikTok, he's never spoke on. So I'm sure I could get him to come and we can talk to you together.
I think that
it'd be like a three-pronged thing there. But you know,
I love that.
He talks about meeting Abraxas, you know, what is it, 5,000-year-old demon that the Romans had, and he actually found a picture on an amulet, a Roman amulet, that matched what he had actually seen, you know, come out of his ceiling. Fascinating story.
Yeah, I would love to do that, Jared, because I think we talked about it. The more people understand that this isn't a personal, like, it's not one person. We're all dealing with a certain portion of this. This is a reality that's in this world, and we understand that other people have gone through it. And to hear some of these stories, like I said, I have yet to see the response in the comments and just people pleading honesty of they're dealing with it and they don't know what to do, but they love the fact that just hearing other people they're not alone. You know, the fact that they're not alone in this journey.
Right, and they feel alone. So you know, we started on Facebook. We started a Hearing Voices support group where they can talk to one another. You know, there's like almost 900 people in there right now. You know, just talking.
That's beautiful. No, that is beautiful.
Trying to get them to do something about it other than complain, though, is a different story.
Yeah.
You know, Facebook keeps burying stuff, and so you put on a YouTube, and then it gets buried, and you know, it get buried. But we did what we could. You know,
like I said, I tried to get certain kinds of information, not about this, but other information that wasn't the mainstream narrative out on Facebook and YouTube and Google. It got just, I mean, no play. They were not trying to push that at all. And as soon as it did get any play, they would shut it down or delete it. So if I did get traction, but this is a weird time right now. Like I said, I think that, you know, you have this, you know, that's why the TikTok is doing so well. I think that's what they're trying to get rid of it. So who knows how long before they, you know, they're aggressively going after it right now. But this is just a unique time, even on YouTube and Twitter right now. Twitter is definitely opened up, so that's been a really big, kind of a huge craze. So I've been able to bounce off some of my, you know, TikTok videos on Twitter, and you know, they don't get 100,000 views, but they get 1,000 or a couple thousand, which is still way better than I'm getting on YouTube, or I'm getting on Facebook, or I'm getting on any of the other programs. So we have a couple of social media networks that are open, and they're letting the algorithms pick naturally. Let's get it. So yeah, if you got it, if he's willing to come on and talk about a story, I'd love to do an interview. And 3 of us, that'd be great.
You know, I'll talk to him. We can set it up after we get done recording. I'll set up a time in April. You know, to get. Now I need to find out from him when he's available. He's only available on the weekends because he works. So if you want,
fair.
I'll contact him, see what he has available, and then get back to you.
Yeah, please do. And then we could do this over email or something. But I'd like to just do a session with you again, just, you know, for my own personal, just kind of work on things. So if you're open to both those ideas, we'll go through email from here on out. But this is a great interview. I got lots of, this is great. This gave us lots of stuff to go with. And this is really a beautiful part too, which is what I was looking for, was to all those questions of what do I do now? Like, you know, now I understand, like, what are my options? Are there options? Is there even a way to help, you know? And so I probably got a few days of editing, but I'm looking forward to this. So.
Well, that's good. You know, like I said, I know nothing about TikTok. This is the first TikTok interview I've had. I have no idea how it works or anything about what to do with it. It's a whole audience that I don't have access to myself.
Well, I think this is the first time that your information, like I said, with some, I do, you know, some creative editing here and there a little bit, but it's, for the most part, it's your information into 3 or 4 minute segments that people get with an algorithm that isn't been tampered with a computer system that actually gets people's response. And I think it was eye opening for me. Like, I didn't expect it. I expected it to do well, but it was even better than I even thought, and how fast it was. Like the first, I think they even slowed it down actually, because the first day I had 100,000 views within 24 hours.
Wow.
Which yeah, for a new count that just started with new information, yeah, it was the reach was great. The comments were intense, and I get comments every day, and I haven't posted since it's been probably 3 weeks since I posted any new videos. So
well, we posted on my website at jerrymarzinsky.com. We've got scores of videos and interviews and with people.
I have your website and your book on the link tree. So as soon as they want to look at any information, they just tap a button and it goes directly to your book and directly to your website now. So
great, wonderful. And they can schedule an appointment from the website if they want.
Yeah, like I said, it's funny though too, is that you're not I would say 1 out of 100 comments is like, it's Dr. Jerry. Like they get so excited, like, because it's, you're kind of a rare gem, that people don't know exists. They don't know any of this information's out there, and then they see other people getting access to it. It's just, the comments are funny. It's really. I got almost a hopeful heart just reading the comments. So many people out there, they're dealing with the same issues, but just excited to know that they weren't alone. And I mean, that's all they needed, is just a start. That was like a glimmer of hope. And then now that they're looking for options, I'm like, all right, let's do this.
Well, yeah, that's kind of what psychiatry does. It reminds me of that, what is it, where that, Dante's Inferno, where it has the thing over the gate, where you go in, all who enter here give up all hope. The psychiatrist's office, and they go, oh, you've got paranoid schizophrenia. You're done for the rest of your life. You got to take these drugs for the rest of your life. There's nothing else that can be done. It's a life sentence. What crock of crap.
Yeah.
It's diabolical. It's just freaking diabolical what they're doing.
It really is.
People believe that because they've learned to trust doctors. Hopefully, after this COVID thing, the trust in the medical system drops a few points.
Yeah, I think that's in the horizon for sure.
People, especially with psychiatry. I mean, for crying out loud, what these people are doing is just unbelievable. It's all money. It's all money.
Yeah, I think the COVID thing. I think it's sad, but I've had some family members that have passed early because of the vaccine. For unnecessary reasons that shouldn't have passed. And those people that were very trusting their entire life, the people that are left behind are changed now. They are not the same people as before this happened. And the amount of information that they want to learn now and how aggressively they're going at it. You put a fire on these people. There's no reason for them to question society or the doctors or the science anymore. Right. Now there is.
Well, I never trusted. I never trusted authority ever. I was raised that way from the time I was a kid. Don't trust authority. I mean, just with the interactions with my dad, I didn't trust him either. So I grew up that way. So I was always watching. When I came up through. When I got into college, I remember they told me I was in an abnormal psychology class in undergraduate school. We had to read a research paper supposedly done by a clinical psychologist that said if 2 crazy guys got together and they both had the same delusion, one of them had to change their delusion. And I didn't know. They don't allow you access to a clinical population. You can't study these people. You can't study this because you walk into a mental hospital and you go, hey man, I'd like to work with some of your schizophrenics and kind of study them a little bit. Get out of here, boy. You ain't letting you in there. Same with the prison. What you want to come into prison? No way. It's all too dangerous. You can't do that. You couldn't get access to this population. You had to jump through their hoops, go through the undergraduate school, go through the graduate school. Then you finally could get access to see for yourself. But this paper in undergraduate school, where, hey, 2 crazy people with the same delusion, one has to give way, right away, red lights went on in my head. So I remembered that. There was no way I could prove it because I couldn't get access to a clinical population to prove it.
Right.
So it was like shortly after I got to work, I was working on the state hospital. I was on one of the psych wards, and a new patient was there, and he was talking to his voices. He was walking around talking to his voices and arguing with the voices. So I wanted to hear what he was saying. So I kind of crept up on him, and then he spotted me, and I said, "Well, I'm Jerry. I'm the psych for this unit. I haven't seen you before. What's your name?" And he looks at me. He goes, "I'm Jesus Christ." And I look at him, and I'm thinking all of a sudden that memory pops back up, and I look at him and I go, No, you're not Jesus Christ because I am. And I just sat there like, okay, what's he going to do? So he looks around and he's thinking about it. And then he looks at him straight in the eye and goes, well, we can both be Jesus Christ. And he strolls off on his merry way. I'm like, okay, what the hell else have they lied to me about? The second big one was this chemical imbalance crap that they started. So by then I was in the state hospital and I'm watching what the psychiatrists are doing. And I asked a bunch of them, why are they like this? Why are schizophrenics like this? Oh, it's a chemical imbalance. Some of them were honest. They said, well, we don't know. We don't know what causes it. Most of them, it's a chemical imbalance. But if it's a chemical imbalance, you would think that they would give some kind of tests before they started giving, medicines, because the medicines are supposed to balance something. That's their supposition, that if there's a chemical imbalance, you give them these drugs, that something should go back into balance. So you have to know what the baseline is. What's out of balance by how much? And then what drug to use. I never saw that. I never saw them give a single test to any of these schizophrenics to test what was out of balance by how much, or what are there like 25, 30 neurotransmitters in the brain, something like that. They never give a test for any of them. No lab work, no EKG, EEG, no kind of test, nothing. They just, oh, I'm hearing voices. Oh, okay, here, take this medicine. That's it. It's like a dartboard. We'll start with this one and see where it goes.
So no physical assessment, no actual testing, just theory.
No, just based on what the guy thought. Now you get a bunch of these guys in a room together, a bunch of psychiatrists, and you give them a diagnosis that's not crystal clear. You're going to get a different diagnosis from each of them. They can't agree. There's not going to be an agreement among them. That's how screwed up they are.
Yeah, that's what I thought was so wild when I talked to some of the veterans and how, depending on which doctor they went to, which diagnosis they got. Like, exactly. What are you talking about? How's that even possible? They're like, and they would list the different doctors, and he said 5 different doctors, 5 different diagnoses. I'm like, wow.
Yeah, that's how it's a scam. It's a friggin' scam. You know, they'd be much better off if they replaced those guys with Mace practitioners. Much better off.
They could keep to that 15, 30-minute model pretty soon. I mean, Mace works pretty quick. You know, they don't have to do that whole, you know, like they like doing these fast appointments where you get them in, get them out. Right. I mean, maybe they could spend a little bit longer with them, but you don't really, I mean, see, from the Mace method, you don't even have to. I mean,
it usually takes about an hour, maybe more, depending.
Okay. We have to slow them down a little bit. We have to get these doctors to get to an hour, which I think would be great. I think they'd actually like it better. I think the doctors, they'd actually get to see real positive results from their work. There's a natural response in the universe that you heal, it comes back. It works both ways, but you're just giving a band-aid, taking a quick profit, you know.
Yeah, I think that might be part of their suicide rate too. You know,
you're not doing the right thing.
Not doing the right thing. You know, what they're doing is dishonest. You know,
they're intelligent people. They put time and effort into, to working.
They're smart. You know, you got to be smart to get into, they're smarter than I am, a lot of them. You know, they just, they're brainwashed. They're friggin' brainwashed. You know, I remember strength testing. You know about strength testing? You know, you don't know about that? Where you can test for something that's toxic, like, putting the toxic substance over your 5th chakra, holding your arm straight out. If it's toxic, you lose your strength. Your arm will go right down. You know, okay. If it's not, if nothing's there, you'll have your strength. You know,
makes sense.
The first time I ran into that was with a Tylenol tab. You know, put the Tylenol tab there. You know, so they pushed down my arm with their pinky. I didn't have any strength. My arm just went right down.
With Tylenol.
Tylenol, anything poisonous, rat poison, Coca-Cola, beer, anything. You put it over that 5th chakra. You do the strength test. If you can figure out what you're allergic to by putting stuff you suspect you're allergic to over your 5th chakra and running that strength test. See, they don't teach that. They don't teach that. You know, it's I don't know. It's really just disappointing. It's really disappointing.
I mean, these are laws of the universe. These are things that, cause and effect. Causes, like we're talking about. This is the stuff that if you had this information, you got a really good chance in this life. You got a chance of really making, I think you could make whatever. You could be a creator. You could be whatever you want to be. But if you don't understand that your body naturally tells you what's toxic or not, or the environment that you're playing in.
Well, that's your spirit telling you that.
Or that you have a spirit that'll tell you those things.
Well, that's why you put it over the 5th chakra. Your body doesn't know it. It's your spirit that knows it. And it reacts to it that way.
How amazing it is to know that you have a spirit that's looking out for you. That's part of you. That's, that's helping you along this journey, rather than just being alone with the voices or society or the media. It's just, there's so many things.
A lot of these life after life YouTube videos will wake a lot of people up.
Yeah. I've seen my sister and my family members, they definitely enjoyed some of those videos. It's helped them shift their perception. But most people don't, they don't have that experience to see. That's what we're doing here, is that they don't get a chance to see somebody else live it or get that feedback. Yeah,
go to YouTube and pull up those life after life videos. These people who have died and come back to talk about it, they're all saying the same thing. Virtually none of them wanted to come back here. They had to be forced to come back here.
That's what I've heard from different groups, for sure. It's almost like a soul trap. Like it's you don't want to come back to this place, especially with your memory wiped and starting new.
Yeah, they all have. Everybody's got a purpose for being here. It's agreed upon before you come down here. You pick your parents, you pick your family members, you pick all these things, you pick your task.
Right.
And a lot of people forget what they're supposed to be doing here. They go back, oh, I forgot to do that. But once your task is done, then you're done.
Well, I guess Jerry, you got a lot more tasks left, buddy.
I'm thinking I must have been drunk when I signed up for this.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm in my 40s now, and I'm trying to. And I feel like I'm just figuring stuff out too. You're just like, you get an idea of where things were, and you go to all this schooling, and I feels like that. I'm feeling on first grade with a lot of this stuff. But I'm open. I love the fact that that there's a school of truth out there that I can keep learning.
Yeah, I kind of 8 years of nothing I could use clinically. Experimental psychology was useful.
Right.
It's what's built into the system. That was probably the most useful bunch of, maybe Roger's stuff. There was some stuff, but not the most of it was it was interesting, but it wasn't useful. Just wasn't useful in helping people.